Right. All right. We are live and welcome. Happy Monday to you all. Can't believe we are knee deep into well, no, we're not in the fourth. We're just about in the fourth quarter. But man, 2024 has absolutely flown. And today's episode is kind of a unique one. First off, our normal co-hosts are not present, which is absolutely acceptable and fine, but we got some awesome coverage, and I'll do those intros shortly. In the meantime, I just want to make sure, let's just see. Okay, yeah, chat working. Can you guys see me? Let me just do a quick hello to everybody. Hello and welcome. Bear with me. I'm just taking care of all the technicalities here, gents. Make sure everybody can chime in and chat. Okay. This is private chat. Yeah. Can you guys in the audience see the chat and hear us okay? Just want to make sure. Okay. Perfect. Thanks, Dave. Yep. I want to make sure you guys can hear and see us. Okay. Perfect. All right. Let's get rocking and rolling. All right. So, as I said, this is not a typical CyberCall at all, in the least. First off, we got a phenomenal guest who I'll introduce you to momentarily. But this is one where our good friend and friend of the channel and also an MSP, Bob Miller, who will also be introed shortly. I'm on LinkedIn on, I think it was a Sunday, Bob, that you were pretty fired up and wrote a pretty lengthy, for lack of a better word, op-ed on what was going on in the city of Columbus, where a cybersecurity researcher has been found to have a restraining order against him, fines levied against him. And, we'll get into the story, but by and large, these are my words. It was trying to, act as a good Samaritan, and all we can see so far. So that's the juxtaposition of this. So in doing the research and everything, I came across an article by Mr. Randy Ludlow, who's with us today, and he wrote a great article which was very in line with the spirit of what Bob was saying. So I reached out to Mr. Ludlow, and thanks so much for responding promptly and joining us. And so with that, before we kick off today and get into the kind of the discussion, Randy, if you could tell us a little about yourself and your background. Thanks for joining.
Well, thank you. Good afternoon. Randy Ludlow here. I'm a journalist of 50 years. Spent the last 20 years of my career as a investigative and state house reporter for the Columbus Dispatch here in Ohio. And I've retired in 2021, and I'm still trying to keep my hand in the business by writing the occasional article and some freelance stuff. And I know the leaders at the Ohio Capital Journal, and I was a little perturbed when I saw they had sought a restraining order against this cyber researcher who was offering information to media that the city was not. So I volunteered to write a commentary about that, which appeared a week ago or last Tuesday in the Ohio Capital Journal.
Awesome. And Randy, what might be more spicy than this actual case and that what you've written about is Eric Tildes is a University of Michigan alum and season ticket holder for many years. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention.
Okay, well, I take no ownership of the Ohio State University because I'm from Indianapolis originally and went to Indiana University, which is no danger to either of these fabled football programs.
But it was probably an Ohio State guy that caused the breach in the first place. So we'll just leave it there.
Shots fired.
Yeah, already.
All right.
No, the shot fired would be referencing that it's been 1,745 days since Michigan lost to Ohio State. Yeah. That would be a shot fired.
Following the 10,000 some odd days the other way.
Details.
All right. So quick intro, Jason. I think everybody else out there knows you, but quick intro for those that may not.
Jason Slagle, president of CWR. I'm an MSP in the Toledo, Ohio area. Amateur security researcher on the side. Here to have fun.
Awesome. And Bob, thanks. Same here. I think a lot know you, but for those that may not.
Yeah, my name is Bob Miller. I am the chief operating officer of a managed security service provider in Lafayette, Louisiana called Global Data Systems. And I am the TIC-E, I think, is it the right term for this at this point?
And Eric, I think everybody knows you, but real quick if they don't.
Yeah, former MSP owner, current attorney who represents a bunch of MSPs.
Perfect. All right, Eric, so I'm going to hand it to you, put you in the driver's seat. We got a lot of things we can cover and talk about here, but let you kick it off.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Andrew. So, Randy, you kind of gave us in your intro like a 50,000 foot view of what happened. Can you take it down to about 10,000 feet and tell us what happened with the original security incident and then what happened subsequently with the restraining order issue?
Well, I'd be glad to. Very quickly, in a general sense, the city learned in July that it had been victimized by a deep and troubling hack in which years and years of information that it had stored online had been stolen in a ransomware attack, or at least a ransom attack, and the city refused to pay any ransom. But at the same time, it was very halting and guarded in what information it provided to the public at first, and that lack of transparency continued. And meanwhile, this so-called self-styled cybersecurity expert came forward and started talking to the media. And to his credit, he was able to show that many of the statements being made by the mayor were not exactly true insofar as the depth of the data that was stolen, what exactly was stolen. I mean, we're talking this involves municipal court records with personal information. This involves to get into City Hall or other city buildings, you had to have your driver's license scanned, and they kept all those scans potentially for more than a decade after they no longer had a use for them. And much of this information was not encrypted. The city claimed, a lot of this is not usable, but as it turned out, yeah, it was out there, and it's, as you say, extracted the temporary restraining order against his cyber expert to stifle him from downloading any data or using it, and it's publicly available if you have the skills, which I don't, to fish this out of the dark web. But it's been a real cluster, as it were.
So Randy, other than the embarrassment factor, right? I mean, so the mayor, the city, the IT folks, everyone I'm sure is embarrassed by this, right? But what do you think the motivation is to go down the route of a restraining order that, once it gets to litigation, at least from what I know, it's very, very unlikely that any bad things will befall the guy who disclosed this data?
Well, in a sense, I think it's a cover your ass move, trying to shift blame off to him as opposed to the city. And he kind of tried to step in and fill the breach to show the public what indeed had been stolen and posted to the dark web, while the city was not as forthcoming as it should have been. This also has attracted a lawsuit from police officers whose personal information was available on the web. And this included police and prosecutorial information, the identity of undercover officers, et cetera, et cetera.
And this is a lawsuit by the police officers against whom?
Against the city for failing to properly secure its data.
Yeah. So that seems reasonable to me, right? That their anger would be placed toward the city and not the person who who exposed it. So that's
Right.
that's reasonable. So Bob, you're usually a very quiet and demure guy,
Like Jason.
and Jason, right? But particularly Bob, this obviously struck a chord with you, right? So
Yeah.
tell me why you took to LinkedIn to express your views.
Yeah, I literally, it was about 20 minutes after I read through that article that my temperature went overload immediately, right? And there are so many facets of this that are disappointing. First of all, the main thing is I just come off a long week of studying CMMC2 and how we're getting regulated to be able to perform and all that. So, all the performance things are involved in that, how we're being held accountable by the government, that sort of thing. And then this article comes out, and the first damn thing I see is a statement by the mayor saying to the effect that the data that was exfiltrated was encrypted or corrupted. But the investigation was still ongoing. And I'm going, first of all, what the hell are you saying something like that for? We all know. I mean, how many incidents this group has worked over the years is ridiculous, but you just know you don't do that, right? And then when you read further about them taking action against the person who's actually trying to get that information that's publicly available. And by the way, I'd like to have a word with that damn district attorney who says you got to have some kind of super duper spy skills and be willing to do business with the dark force people in the world. That's a load of crap. We all know that, right? A good high schooler with a good Google search and a couple small free to own tools, you can see every bit of that. That information's in the wind, right? And I went and read the damn court filing. By the way, I went and looked the court filing up for this, and the kind of crap they're saying in that court filing has to do with things like receiving stolen property and causing unrest. And by the way, the city caused that, not this guy. Their information's in the wind, right? And so that was the basis after reading through. And then I've read more over the weekend since then. I've read more to show where this gentleman made multiple attempts to communicate with the city after they made that grossly inaccurate statement to let them know that wasn't accurate. And they never returned the man's call. He called their attorneys. He called their people in the IT departments. None of that got answered, not a piece of it, right? And so then there's the other me that's looking at this going, you know what this is? There's two things. One, the stupidity that it represents, right? In making statements and taking action against an individual who's clearly not in the wrong. As Eric said, he's not in the wrong. But here's the part that's even worse to me. Now, every other security professional has got a wet blanket thrown on him for even thinking about doing something like this in the future, right? Because even though we know he's probably not going to have any charges that are going to successfully be fielded against him, but just the act of having to defend his damn self now with these people that are in charge is throwing a wet blanket on everybody. So is that really helping the safety of the people in Ohio? Yes or no? My answer is hell to the no. It's not doing a damn bit of that. So that literally talking about it has got me pissed off again, right? Because and I've read 20 articles since then.
Tell me how you really feel about
how bad it is, right? They just keep talking about how bad it is.
Yeah. Right. Well, we're taught as reporters that the truth is an absolute defense. That if what you report is true, it is unactionable toward any legal action. This guy came forward with the truth. Now, granted, this is not a slander or a libel claim, but it seems to me we're talking about a First Amendment right here, and a prior restraint to prevent you from doing something that it is beyond the realm here.
There's a term that lawyers like to use. It's called getting hometowned, right? And it's why you have venue clauses, why you have governing law clauses in your contracts, so you can litigate where it's going to be most friendly to you, right? Think about who signed this judge's paycheck, right? And so those are the things that lead me to believe that, once this goes through the legal process, at least knowing what I know, they're going to have a really, really, really hard time getting anything out of this guy. So
right. Well, they mentioned the possibility of criminal charges.
Yes,
thankfully none have been filed, but they are seeking unspecified damages.
25 grand. That's what's in the court
conduct and disclosing information that is available on the web, as you noted, to anyone with a few skills and a few tools.
Yeah, now the guy's got to go hire his own lawyer and defend himself
That's
against seemingly frivolous claims. So, Jason, give me your thoughts. Tell me how this could really impact or have some effect on the white hat community.
Yeah, I mean, it's horseshit. So my guess is that they're basically trying to silence this guy until it blows over, right? So it's like they know it's not going to hold up in court, or I suspect they know it's probably not going to hold up in court. But if they can make the guy be quiet until the heat passes, then they've succeeded at their mission, right? And this guy stops talking to the news, and by the time he's allowed to again, by the time it's all dropped, the public has an attention span of like 12 seconds. It'll be on to the next thing. It scares me, right? Because increasingly we are seeing people being swung at by either government entities or corporate entities attempting to silence them and browbeat them into submission to not talk about like topics that are uncomfortable for the people that are doing it, right? In our industry, several of our vendors have had a history of doing that. I think it's gotten a little bit better, right? But there have definitely been legal actions levied against various companies and even giant security research companies, like the Bishop Foxing comes to mind, right? Where it's like, you have a company swinging at somebody else in an attempt to silence them and quiet them down. And I'm just not having any of that. Like, come at me, bro.
Yeah. And surprisingly, the mayor didn't even graduate from Ohio State.
Yeah. The mayor, so I can forgive the mayor, right? The mayor was told probably by some person down on the thing that the data was encrypted, right? But the data was probably encrypted at rest. They were in a running server, right? So of course it was decrypted, right? No one is encrypting that stuff on rest. I'm sure they just grabbed a file server. That driver's license scanning is probably doing scan to a file on some Windows server somewhere. That Windows server may be encrypted at rest, but when it's running, it's not encrypted.
Well, help me out here, because you're the cybersecurity experts, but is there not a federal law against government retaining any information it no longer needs?
Yeah, you
such
would
as
think
vacated driver's licenses just to get in the city hall.
You would think there are data retention policies that they have published somewhere that they are likely in violation of.
Yeah.
You know what? We'd have a much shorter conversation if we talk about the policies they actually have in place. Because I got a feeling that if we all go ask them how many CIS controls they're observing in that organization, I'm gonna guess that we're gonna be close to goose egging it. So because that, Jason, tell people how long it takes to exfiltrate 3 terabytes or 6 terabytes of data. How long does it take to do that?
I mean, even at 100 meg up, it's days and days and days. And more importantly, how do you not notice that your outbound stream is pegged for that long, right? So either they trickle it out so long that literally you had weeks or months to do it, or they impacted performance of the rest of the network, in which case somebody should have noticed. Like, that is relatively unforgivable in an organization that size. I mean, Columbus is what, 4-ish million population? It's not a small city.
So 14th largest city in the nation.
Yeah.
Pop quiz. How many people do they have in the IT staff? I can tell you this number, so I'm just asking. Take a guess.
I don't know myself.
180.
Holy.
Over 180.
Wow. Somebody should be right. Somebody should have noticed and rang the bell.
Yeah, interesting.
Now, one thing the city has done, and I guess a bid to partially
say it like you mean it, Randy.
Yeah, suffice to hold off its liability. They are offering protection against identity theft for everybody in the city. So millions of people can potentially sign up for this identity theft protection through Experian or whoever it is, including people who had tickets in municipal court a decade ago who don't even live here.
Jason, but how useful post Expo is that really?
Everyone, that's table stakes these days, right? It's like basically they have an insurance policy or they're paying for that monitoring if somebody does it. I'm actually really curious, and Eric may know, I'm really curious the uptake rate on that stuff, because my guess is it's really low and no one actually ever signs up for
this. It's very low. The thing is, though, the cities like that are often self-insured, right? So this might be coming out of some reserves, or if it gets bigger than that, out of some operating budget, if they are in fact. I don't know whether they are or not, but a lot of municipalities are.
Eric, just quick question to you, and just crystal ball type question. Could this flip around on the city? Like, for example, Randy's question to Jason about, shouldn't there be data retention policies? And, if this guy I guess there's a few things here. I want to ask Jason eventually from a hacker side, could this flip on them? The hackers get pissed off and align, but could this flip against the city?
Of course. And like Randy said, it already has to a certain extent with certain police officers whose data was breached are already going back after them, and there was some legitimate concern, right? There was some concern over undercover operations and things like that. And, and this researcher guy, I presume he would do the right thing along those lines and not disclose it, even though it is publicly available. But yeah, I think the city is going to be in for a world of hurt given the size and scope of this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Roddy's comment, he just dropped in there about intent, right? Because there's it's like, in my mind, the judge should have squashed this kind of early into the process, but it's not, because I think in common sense terms. And then Roddy's pointing out that it's all about intent when you're dealing with the law, right? And they don't really judge based on intent. They base it on the binary of, does it have the potential to have been broken the law or not? And that's where this kind of falls down, right? Because receiving of stolen property, implies that you're going to do something with it for personal gain in some way, right? And while
Bob, there actually is an intent requirement in receiving stolen property. Usually, I don't know what it is in Ohio, but usually you have to receive it with the intent to deprive the owner of the property, right? Yes. So some thief, walking by you, hands you an iPhone on the street. Yes, it's stolen, but that's not receipt of stolen property. When you put it in your pocket to walk home and wipe it clean, that's receipt of stolen property. So in this case, look, this is all publicly available. I don't think that this guy intended to deprive the owners of the property. To the contrary, my understanding is that he was going to release the information to the owners of the property.
That's correct.
So there is an intent requirement to a certain extent, usually.
Yeah, but the interesting thing is, if you read the court document, number 15, the item number 15 in there, it says only individuals willing to navigate and interact with a criminal element on the dark web who also have the computer expertise and tools necessary to download data from the dark web would be able to do so. The dark web posted data is not readily available to the public consumption. That's literally in the damn court document.
That may not be true depending on which threat actor group actually did it. Some of them hide it behind Tor, which, by the way, isn't a very large barrier of entry, but a lot of them now are mirroring that data on non-Tor sites explicitly to increase accessibility of it.
Randy, what do you have there, by the way?
Well, that's just the motion for the temporary restraining order that I wrote about. This was, by the way, granted ex parte.
Yes.
Mr. Ross was not even allowed to be present to argue against it. The city deemed it such a danger, and a judge agreed. Now, that, as I understand it, it's not a huge legal hurdle to get a TRRO because it's only temporary. This is only good for 14 days. And after further briefing and argument, when we can make a decision on whether we're going to grant an injunction. If our lawyer,
my guess is they drop all of it in 14 days, right? The 14 days is enough for the heat to blow by, and then they'll just unwind all of it.
It's probably a good bet.
My biggest concern with this was about us as security professionals, right? I mean, that's what I keep. That was really the focus of this thing, and I felt like we needed to make some sort of public statement that this is not acceptable. This is, the ability to abuse, the laws of the country and or your position, just for what Jason's talking about, so that you can get a timeout to have enough time to get your shit straight. That's just not acceptable in a situation like that. This guy's going to have to pay money to defend himself.
Yeah.
Well,
he'll have a counterclaim.
When I talked to him, he's hoping to find somebody who might go pro bono or the ACL, something along those lines.
Yeah,
I'm not licensed in Ohio, unfortunately, but I'm sure he will find someone to take this pro bono. It'll end up in the news, and it'll be
the EFF.
You're allowed to apply for temporary privileges before the Supreme Court.
Yeah, but then I'd have to go to Columbus. Who wants to go there?
Hey, come on.
I mean, the EFF will be all over this, I would guess. So he'll find somebody that's willing.
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah.
So Bob, let's turn it over to you. You got a few questions for Randy, I believe.
Yeah, I do. Let me run down. Oh yeah. You're talking about the ones that I sent. Yeah. Okay. So yeah. All right. Let me get them real quick. I scroll past. Okay, I got them. Oh, there we go. Yes. All right. So Randy, from the interest. So this is the question I had. We're looking at this from, kind of through a lens, right? We're in different places and different geographies. My question, one of the questions to you is, as a response from the administration for that particular city, is this the type of thing that has been seen as a pattern with them as far as dealing with, something this volatile as far as the people, the mayor and his team? Is this a pattern, or is this just a one-off for them about how they're behaving in this particular situation?
Well, this is the first incident of its type I can recall. I mean, certainly it's Columbus is, one party rule, like most of the major cities here in Ohio. It's all Democrat, and even county government, the Democrats have largely taken over, and most of the judges are Democrats. And indeed, the judge to whom this case was originally assigned, but before she recused herself, had worked for the city attorney for like over a decade. So she got out of Dodge. Good call there. But no, they've kind of had, we're in charge. Nobody can threaten us. What are you going to do kind of attitude. So.
Okay, that's kind of in line with what I was interested in. My other question to you was pretty straightforward, and that was, look, what's happened since this, right? So we've seen the articles. I've watched a couple the YouTube videos of the mayor actually explaining this, or the district attorney. It is kind of interesting all by itself. But what's happened since then that in the last week or so? Is there been any developments that we have not seen?
I've really not noticed any changes as such. We're waiting for Mr. Ross to get a court and go in and respond to the TRRO.
Very good.
Mr. Slagle, over to you.
Yeah. This one, I don't know if it's better for Randy or Eric, right? Like, I want to go back to the stolen property thing, right? Because to me, once it's publicly available, the stolen property claim becomes a lot less dicey, right? Like, how is this any different than me happening to find something on the street and picking it up to take with the intention of exposing the fact that it was there, right? Like, if this was tangible property on the street and I found somebody's wallet and I picked the wallet up that was stolen to report the fact that it was stolen, could I be arrested for receiving stolen property? Because that's what this seems like to me.
Yeah, Jason, that's why it goes back to what your intent is, right? If you pick up the wallet to go, walk it 2 blocks down to the police station to say, hey, look, I found this wallet, that's not going to be receipt of stolen property. If you find the wallet and you stick it in your pocket and bring it home and then start, buying a bunch of stuff on Amazon with the stolen credit card, then that is, right? Here, it's a little bit tougher in that it's not tangible necessarily, right? It's electronic information, but everything that I've read about this guy and his intent, it certainly wasn't to deprive anyone of their property. Like I said, if anything, it was to get the property back into the owner's hands.
Right. Well, beyond this, they further accuse them, in addition to receiving stolen property, of knowingly disseminating information gained from the confidential statewide police computer database.
And they might have an argument if it wasn't otherwise publicly available.
Knowingly attempting to intimidate or hinder victims of crime in the prosecution of criminal charges, and by intimidating witnesses to criminal acts, and knowingly attempting to imitate or hinder victims of crime in the filing and prosecution of criminal charges and of witnesses in criminal cases in the discharge of their duty.
Randy, I mean,
they're suggesting he is guilty of a long line of criminal offenses.
I mean, honestly, it's like, to me, everything you just read is like the definition of gaslighting, is it not? Eric, I mean, the way everything they just...
It seems to be. I mean, look, in my opinion, it sounds like it's a misuse of the legal system,
100%.
you know, what do I know though?
Yeah. Well,
Yeah, I got another one, and this one's particularly close to my heart. I is somebody that can sometimes get a bit spicy. I'll reveal I'm presently sitting on a very damning internal email from a large vendor in our space that covers a lot of really bad marketing practices that they're using that I've been afraid to come forward to because I'm afraid of something like this. So, Randy, what do you suppose the First Amendment concerns are for antics like this? Like, can people be punished for going forward with information and, things like that?
Well, I mean, this falls totally outside the general realm of publication. Okay, doesn't involve slander, does not involve libel, but then again, they're alleging that he is causing harm through these various acts, which obviously will have to be adjudicated by a judge. But again, to me, it's a pure First Amendment action. He is merely accessing and at least the limited purview of reporters, showing them information that's publicly accessible on the web. I think that does violate First Amendment rights. And to tell him he can no longer do anything with it, that's prior restraint. And that's obviously been held to be illegal over and over.
And Jason, seeing that this is a public forum and we're here with proper intent, I think you should go ahead and read your letter. It's like, this is a media outlet.
I don't think you want me to do that, Andrew, because I think you may have some relationship with this vendor in question.
Oh my God.
Well, then, Jason, instead, just read the list of names that were in the data breach.
Yeah.
That'd be better.
To go to it, I have evidence of a vendor that has a very low standing in the community that is covering some of the shady back alley methods they're using to try to keep negative press about them out of community, including potentially paying off people that run communities.
Wow.
It's fun.
Wow.
Didn't Andrew just buy a new car?
Yeah.
Got a swimming pool behind him.
Andrew wasn't listed in this. There are several others that were.
Well, I'm really glad to hear that. Bob, I think you had one more for Randy as well.
Well, we kind of covered. Yeah, we kind of covered the other one. The other one was more about that from looking from the outside, it looks like to me that it was an abuse of power, right? And I mean that's kind of what Randy was reading through himself. So he almost covered that one early on. But to me, again, this just comes down to the fact that they're trying to pin all of their argument, because the only reason he could be charged with any of that all those other charges is if that data wasn't readily available. And the bottom line, that's the crux of this. That I'm sorry, I hate to tell them, they may be embarrassed. I'm sorry if you're embarrassed. I would be embarrassed if I lost terabytes of data about people. That's absolutely true. And I saw another post from the city that said it's going to wind up costing them $3.5–4 million to clean this up, right? Which goes back to the argument that Jason and Eric and all of us in the MSSP world talk about. How much security could they have paid for over what period of time to be in a better position to not let this happen to begin with? But when it does happen, what do? They immediately start tearing down the individuals that are raising their hands and saying, hey, you're not right. You're misstating that. You may not know that you're misstating it, or you may know that you're misstating it, either of which is is not the right use of the forum, right? Not use of the platform. Raises their hand to try and help the people who are like me. And by the way, Andrew, you and I've talked about this. Our DMV in Louisiana lost all of our data set for everybody who drives in Louisiana. That includes our driver's license numbers, our social security numbers, our alternate email addresses, everything. They lost every bit of it. The addresses to our houses. It's the first time in history, all those data sets. We've always had, you could lose your social security number, and we've never had our driver's license lost in the process. But this is the first time they had lost all of it, and it had to do with the move it flaw that they were warned about 2 years before they lost our data. My biggest damn argument about this is that we don't have recourse as citizens right now to deal with that, right? At least at the state level for sure. I don't know about the city level, but at the state level. And this just smacked me in the face again of them being cavalier about not putting the right kinds of controls in order to protect the data. And then what's the first thing they do when somebody raises their hand? They try to browbeat them down and bully them with these uses of these lawsuits to keep them from being involved. Enough's enough. We got, as a group, this is an MSSP forum, right? Right? A Boom is about this ecosystem. We have to push back. There are times when we have to push back against this sort of shit. And this just seemed to me to be a really good moment to be able to do that.
Yeah, it's an excellent point. I mean, look, it's funny, the irony of you studying for CMMC, right? The whole point of the CMMC is data, right, Bob? It's about data privacy.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. That's what it's about. 100%.
Interesting. Jason, you had I think there was a few questions there.
Yeah.
Eric.
Yeah. So incidents with exfiltration are a big deal, right? Especially if there's criminal case data. I do wonder, right? Like, I deal with the government agency in the past. I've dealt with the one that wants warrants, the leads data here in our area. It's pretty rare to see a restraining order on any sort of exfil or any sort of legal case here, right? Like, what does the restraining order specifically prevent him from doing, and why does the city think it's necessary? Do you have any insight? Have you read it and have any insight into it?
Yeah. So, I mean, taking us back up to a 30,000 foot view, right? What are restraining orders? A restraining order is a demand for you to do something or to not do something. Usually if you're talking about litigation, right? If they sued the guy, usually judges don't tell you what to do and what not to do. You get money damages, you don't get money damages. Yeah. It's that kind of thing. So that's why restraining orders, even temporary restraining orders, have a very high standard, right? And Randy is right. TROs are granted with regularity. The actual injunction later on is a lot tougher to get because you have to show what's called irreparable harm, right? You have to show that something bad is going to happen that cannot be reversed, right? So, and if you look at this, through a really objective lens, this guy was doing the right thing. Now, if he wanted to be malicious, he could have been malicious, right? He could have, given the names and identities of all the undercover police officers in Columbus, Ohio, and other things like that. So that's a legitimate interest to protect. Now, was he doing that? No, right? So the issue here is, what exactly was he doing? He was trying to repatriate the information with its owner, right? That's at least my understanding. That's what he was trying to do. So that's why I believe, and I don't remember who said it, but I think in 14 days or even less now, I think it's going to go away. If it doesn't go away, and by the way, the injunction is just the first, the temporary injunction, temporary restraining order is the first part. Injunction is the second part. And then there's the lawsuit, right? Where they've then got to go convince a judge that is subject to a defense that the guy's done something wrong. And I think that, this guy wins. He could have a paralegal litigate that case and he still wins, right? I don't think it's a really, really tough standard to get over. I think he'll have a really, really good argument to get the case out of Columbus, which will get rid of some of the hometown that we talked about before. But yeah, the TROs are pretty easy. Injunctions are pretty tough, and the lawsuit, I think, will go away on its own. But it's going to cost the guy some money, unfortunately. Yeah. And we can talk about all the problems with the American legal system, but at the end of the day, you can sue anyone for any reason at any time. You don't have to be right.
I'm going to go a little off book here. In the past, we've seen this dichotomy and this argument back and forth between, even on this very call, between the white hats, I'll call them, arguing that we shouldn't release proof of concepts, we shouldn't release data that can be used to facilitate these things, and people like me that are more transparency focused want that information out there. How do you view that cases and restraining orders like this? How do they play into that larger discussion in the security theater around things like disclosure?
Well, and that's just it. They don't, right? And they don't because this decision was probably made in 15 minutes, right? There was not much deliberation. They went and they found, in my opinion, a friendly judge to give him the restraining order. They probably didn't think that someone like Randy was going to come along and write an article about this, and now it's exposed to, you know, thousands or tens or hundreds of thousands of people. But you know, I don't think anyone is really looking into the intent. I think at this point, it's just about the embarrassment factor. It's just about the fact that they wanted to sweep it under the rug and hope that it would go away. And I think by doing that, they've made it exponentially worse.
Right. Well, I think the city is potentially has legal liability here for its failure to come forthcoming until our hero, as it was, came forward. You could make an argument, hey, I could have frozen my credit. I could have taken any number of steps to protect myself from identity theft or other fraud.
Yeah.
Yet for your delay in telling me my information had been compromised.
And we haven't even talked about things like HIPAA, right? I would imagine there are city-owned hospitals, right? And I would imagine, again, I don't know.
No city-owned hospitals.
No, but if there's personnel records, right, then it probably includes some
I've yet to hear anything about this involving the city Department of Health data. So I'm thinking that may have been held separately.
It could be even worse than that, because as Eric pointed out, cities often self-insure. And if they self-insure and they are insurance companies, then they are de facto covered entities, I would imagine. And this is a very, very reportable breach from a HIPAA standpoint, I would imagine.
Well, they got into their HR database. So whatever could be represented in their HR database.
Then you're talking about people with disabilities, and then you're talking about health information. You know, it's a very, very slippery slope.
Is there CGIS stuff here, Eric? That is
could be.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure.
Definitely.
Some of the data that was revealed was things about court cases, so there's for sure CGIS info there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. If you'd had a municipal court case for the last decade plus, they supposedly got all that information. Now, granted, you can't access a good bit of that through the online docket, but there's information there that does not appear online as a matter of public purview.
Yeah, I mean, Eric, given that, right, like given this breach and everything that's going on there, you know, what do you suppose, like the more we talk about this, the worse it seems. What do you suppose the risks are to the city now with regards to this?
You know, I don't think that the bad stuff's already happened, right? And nothing that we say after the fact is going to change it. There was a data breach. You know, that whether and how it becomes public is really irrelevant. You know, I think that the good thing that's going to come out of this is that people are going to know if their data was included in that data breach. You know, the cost to the city is going to be astronomical. I saw someone talked about $3 or $4 million. I think it's going to be multiples of that by the time all is said and done.
Why so, Eric? Where's can you unpeel that?
I think just the size and scope of it, right? This is the kind of thing where everybody in a community was affected, right? It wasn't like, you know, it was a hospital, right? In New York where, you know, 1 out of 1,000 people were affected. This is a city where everyone lives together and their neighbors are talking about it. You know, I don't live there. And Jason, you even said that in Toledo, it's not terribly, you know, front of mind for a lot of people, but I guarantee that if you're in Columbus, Ohio, you've heard about it and you're probably talking about it. And, you know, Chris Lair can tell you what the stats are for people who take you up on credit monitoring and all that stuff. I think it's going to be a lot higher given how many people and how concentrated the people are who were affected by it.
I don't think this is going to go away fast. I think, and Chris pointed that out, I think this is like a bad hot dog. It's going to stick around because of the scope of what's going on and the fact that.
Is that a Louisiana thing, Bob? A bad hot dog?
No, it's uniform across the
United
States.
Crawfish. That's crawfish.
We're going to Tony Paco's, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Right over there.
The bottom line, this touches on so many new angles on this that it's going to wind up having attention because of that, right? I mean, especially and like if I'm a citizen, I would be trying to get a class action suit or an audit so that they have to produce an IT audit because I'm thinking negligence in this situation, right? I mean, I'm thinking we want to know what really went on and we're not getting a square shake from the people who are telling us. So I don't think this is, I honestly don't think it's going to go away that quick. I think somebody needs to take them to task and find out how bad it really is because we ain't getting We ain't getting a clear story from the people who are talking. That's been proven. That's a QED. We all know that that's how that went. So it's going to be around.
So in other industries, we have like whistleblower protections and other things like that, right? Do you think there's some sort of, and this probably is best for Eric again, some sort of precedent that could end up getting set here if this goes all the way to court to create precedent for something like a Good Samaritan law or some sort of protection for those willing to come forward for things like this?
I hope it does. Like I really, really do. And granted, there can be abuse of whistleblower protection laws. That there's no doubt about that. But I think it can also lead to good behavior like this, or arguably good behavior, right? You get 100 people in a room and you'll have 98 of them say that what this guy did is a good thing. But you're also going to have some people say that it's not, right? And that's okay to have that differing opinion. So if something like that comes out of a case like this, I think it's nothing but positive.
Yeah,
I agree.
Interesting. Jason, so I made note of this before, but let's say, this guy, the screws go down on this guy further, or even right now, as hackers tend to, I don't know how to put this correctly, but do things for the right, seem to do things like when people are wronged, as ironic as that sounds, but could this come back to haunt the city from the black hat side?
I mean, the threat actors have already, in theory, not been paid, right? So I don't know that this changes the calculus as far as the threat actors there are concerned at all. Could potentially have some, depending on which way the case falls, it could have effects on how other things are done in the future, right? If it's harder for people to expose the fact that these breaches have happened, then maybe there's a little bit less press on them, and maybe that hurts them a little bit. But I honestly don't see this having a lasting effect in how threat actors, treat things. They're looking for the payouts and they're looking for the low-hanging fruit, and they're willing to walk away from. They're willing to just put it all out there if you're not willing to pay them. And I don't think this changes that calculus at all.
No, just as an FYI, I just checked and there's been no change in anything at this point as far as the TRO or any response.
Yeah,
Does show they just did get Mr. Ross served by the papers. So,
Tom Lawrence is pointing out in the comments, he's pointing out the fact that this included live investigative data for undercover officers and everything else, right? So the rings of this rock being thrown in the bathtub are going to go on forever, right? Because there is so much that's going to wind up coming out of this. And by the way, just an FYI for any judges listening, a year or two of credit monitoring doesn't do anything for this type of data. These are permanent ID elements for these human beings. And most of these guys put it in deep storage and wait 3 or 4 years from now when everybody's got their guard down, and then they exploit the living hell. It's in the wind. It is in the wild. Yeah. The damage was done when it was lost. That's where the concentration of effort should be.
Well, so let me give this to Jason again. Jason, I mean, let's say arguably there's a big data set of emails out there, just for conversation's sake, right? And I didn't look at the data set, but let's just assume there are. Like, can't you foresee some really good phishing campaigns coming out of this? Like, hey, if you've been wronged, if you kind of take us through some of the phishing scenarios that you can think of out of this, and redirect STEM 360, or even corporate stuff, redirect STEM 360. Like, you could have a field day, couldn't you? Even still post, you know what I'm saying? Talk to us a little about that, Jace.
Yeah, I mean, that level of data, right? Like Matt and I see you just joined the chat. Matt Lee and I are actively involved in the hacking stuff now, where we have some MSPs we're attempting to breach that we have legal permission to do. Man, that data would be a gold mine, right? Like, any data that I can get at that gives me information about a person lets me very, very much so actually craft a good spear phishing campaign against them. And unfortunately for the general public here, this is not limited to just employees of the city, depending on the data that's out there, right? Like, I know, perfect example here, even just going to a scam, I know you were in a car accident based on the legal filings, I may know some information about the injuries you had. So now I do a phishing campaign where I pretend that I am a physician from the place you're visiting for your injuries and use that to gain additional, information from you or extort you or scam you or whatever the case is, right? That data is an absolute treasure trove for anyone actually willing to put the effort into parse it and use it. The question is what the bar for that actually is.
Well, I mean, again, here, why don't we talk our favorite subject these days? Because everything is AI, Jason. But you could throw automation at this, couldn't you? To a degree,
100%. This is a great use for AI. Honestly, it's I'm relatively like meh on the AI thing. We use it for we use the good use cases. That's actually a very good use case. You train up a model, right? You can even do a RAG on it where you can ask it questions about a given person, right? Like you could even depending on the data set, you could potentially do automatic extortion or scamming based on the response the person gives to you, feed it back into the AI and get the most likely response based on the data you have. Yeah, there's a ton of stuff you can do there.
And you don't even have to dig that deep. Just send an email to everyone in Columbus saying, hey, put your information here. We'll tell you if you are part of the breach.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
80% of them, not 80. A bunch of people are going to do that.
Yeah. Andrew, I can tell you that this week I got 2 different phishing attempts for me personally. They had pictures of my house.
Yeah, that's a new one.
Funny you say that. There's the new Sextortion one that and by the way, Bob, we probably don't want to record this piece of their, that.
Man, I don't care what anybody knows about me. Nobody's going to want to watch it. But the bottom line is that the techniques have changed, right? Now I get a picture of Google. I get a Google geolocation image of my house as a part of the process.
Yeah.
Right.
Have you heard about this, Randy? So basically, So basically, it used to be like, someone would, fish you and say, hey, I've got these tapes of you doing some really illicit stuff from a sex, like they're calling sextortion. So then they're taking a step further now with Google Maps and then narrowing in, like recapturing and like, here's your driveway, like, and really making it incredibly pressure, like high pressure. Like we not only do you have the tapes, but we know exactly when you were doing it. Here's the video, picture of your driveway. It's pretty fun stuff they're doing out there.
Yeah, and only half of it's true, but it doesn't matter, right? I mean, the point is you're always having to speculate on what they have or don't have. That's the problem, right? This information allows them to craft the backstory to make it more convincing. That's the whole point, right?
Yeah, you see Laird's comment, Bob. That's all we need.
Yeah, I know. You know what I'm sure about is he was prescribed just for that reason.
So out of curious, Randy, any public reaction on like negative or positive about Mr. Ross? Like, do people care like about this gentleman?
I know a lot of people thought, this was self-promoting, which may have given his penchant for, hey, I love the media, but, he did profess here, hey, I'm trying to get information out the city's hiding. I tried to call them and said, hey, I was able to find all this stuff. Why haven't you alerted people? And indeed, I have screenshots of the phone calls he made to the city, and which he says were not returned. He couldn't find the emails. He said he didn't send one, which kind of made me raise an eyebrow. But at any rate, no huge outcry. I think so many people have got so used to so many data breaches that it kind of, like water off a duck's back at this point. You're the experts, but
no, you're right. It happens every other week.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. There is, we've basically desensitized the public to data breaches because it happens so often.
I think that's what irritated me the most was I knew this was going to get whitewashed at some point, but there's some really important differences between this situation and other situations like this. And if we don't as a community keep pushing this message and keeping it in their face, then we're going to get what we deserve by not being a part of this. I mean, at some point you got to take a stand. And this to me was something important enough to take a stand.
Yeah, I think this is a bellwether, like the Missouri F12 case, right, where the guy hit F12 and went to view source, and then they arrested him and charged him with hacking because he used the page source and the data was in it. It's these sort of cases are cases that the community, the security community, pays a lot of attention to because it very much impacts our livelihood.
Yes, absolutely. Eric, so final question here, crystal ball question about, where do we go from here? What's next? What do you anticipate happening? I know we've talked a lot about 14 days, but that this is going to be dropped. What do you foresee kind of wrapping this up from a legal side? What's the outcomes?
I think it'll eventually go away. I still think it's baseless. Whether it goes away at the injunction stage or the lawsuit stage, I don't know. I hope that it doesn't have a chilling effect on other people doing similar things, because what this guy's doing is good. It's really, really good. And whether that's at the city government or state government level, or whether it's in the private sector, it's good for this information to get out there. There's no, with limited possibility, that there's really no downside, right? Assuming that these whistleblowers are going to not do anything malicious with the data, or not release any of the quote unquote harmful data that might be out there that could, jeopardize investigations, jeopardize people's lives, things like that. Yeah. But at the end of the day, I hope that it doesn't have that chilling effect. I hope that more people out there will do similar things.
Eric, would it be worth, so assuming that it goes away, we think it's going to go, and they drop it in 14 days, how do we get case law created, right? Like, how do we reverse the situation here? And that if they drop it in 14 days, then nothing is resolved, right? And it doesn't change anything in the future.
It's not about case law, it's about legislation. Okay. I think that's where you have to go to the government. Which is scary in and of itself. Yeah. But you're absolutely right. Nothing here is going to be precedential, right? It's just going to affect this case. Now, if they sue them and it goes all the way and gets appealed, and then you're talking about case law and precedents, but I really don't think it's going to get there.
Yeah. And they don't want it to, I'm guessing. That's why they're going to get rid of it as soon as possible.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Well, Jason, how much do they have to understand to be able to actually make a good law to help with this anyway, right? I mean, there's the other part. You need to understand the ramifications of your decisions to be willing to correct them, right?
Yeah, and that's where I honestly don't think state local is the place to have that fight and that discussion. I think it's got to go all the way up to CISA, right? And it's got to go all the way up to, pressure at the federal government level to try to put some sort of protections in place, because otherwise it's going to be a mismatch of little local laws.
I agree.
Well, awesome discussion. Randy, thank you so much for joining us on such short notice. It was really awesome to meet you and great to have you. I hope you'll come back again.
Thank you. Hopefully this will get resolved with a minimum of pain to our whistleblower, and we don't have a bad legal precedent hanging out there for your community.
Yeah. No, it was great perspective. Appreciate you sharing. Bob, Jason, thanks a million for jumping on and co-hosting. It was fantastic. Eric, thanks as always.